I love my dog. The other day, she peed on my pizza. But that's my fault. I shouldn't have yelled at her while she was standing on my pizza. But she's cool. Her name is Cat, which I know sounds like a stupid name for a dog, but that's only because it is a stupid name for a dog. It's even stupider when you realize it's actually short for cat or pillar.
Welcome to the reboot of the Twilight Pwn, the internet's third most popular Twilight Zone podcast. My name is John, and I'm joined by my all-new co-host, Fred. How you doing this week, Fred?
Nice! I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm all right. I was just working on some paperwork for my life insurance plan when you called, so things are good.
We got a fresh new look for you. I was at a work event.
So that is why we don't really do this on a regular basis.
Most listeners will think we've returned, just to time it up and sync it with the new Jordan Peele 2019 Twilight Zone. But the real reason is that you broke your finger.
That's the big driver here is... we obviously have our just lives that have encroached on all this, but right. Since we moved to Pittsburgh, my main social outlet has been basketball twice a week, which eats up, what little spare time I have. But thankfully, I dislocated it sometime in January, and it won't heal right, so I can't play. So here we are,
back on the mic. So when you play basketball, not to ask a sensitive question, but are you good?
Well, to alienate the people who are first tuning into this.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please. I'd love to talk. What?
Yeah, are you good at basketball or
no? See,
you are tall. That we have that.
I'm tall.
Yeah,
so I'm deceptively bad. I didn't play any organized sports more or less until I started when we moved here a couple years ago.
Right.
So
yeah.
I've made great strides from where I started. I think I'm at this level, mediocre plus.
Okay.
I'm probably a D plus, C minus level at this point.
Got it. Yeah, it's most basketball careers don't start at 35 in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's not the ideal time.
Yeah.
I'm very tall. I really can't jump very high. I'm very nervous about dribbling, so I'm more of a defensive hustle guy.
Right. You're like a big metal post that you just put up in the general vicinity.
Essentially.
Right, got it. If there are any new listeners tuning in, just to catch the synchronicity of the new Jordan Peele Twilight, we should warn you that takes about an hour for us to get to the actual show.
Yeah.
But for the benefit of those listeners, we'll cut to the chase a little bit sooner and announce that we're back and we're doing the Jordan Peele 2019 show. And tell the good people what episode we're doing, John.
For some reason, CBS did not get in touch with us and give us, what do you call those, proof copies.
Right.
So we're starting at the start with the one that was free on YouTube for everyone. This is entitled The Comedian. It is the first episode of the first season. It officially premiered on April 1st, 2019.
Samir Wassan is an artist of great principle. A man who refuses to compromise his beliefs for a cheap joke. But tonight, he felt the rush of the limelight for the first time. Now, he'll have to decide what really matters to him when the laughter stops, and how much he's willing to give to the Twilight Zone.
Respectable.
Yeah, it's a respectable first outing. You don't want to swing for the fences your first pitch of the first game. It's not quite as purple as I think Serling maybe would have wanted.
Yeah, I don't know if audiences today would be ready for that, but
Right.
I think it fits what people think a lot of the Twilight Zone is like.
Right.
but they're kind of overlooking how dang purple his intros often were.
Yeah, it's like got the cadence and the vibe, but if it was Serling, it would be like a septuagenarian who once twisted the way that
it's missing about 75% of the words.
Yeah,
but it's good.
It's funny too because it's an hour-long episode.
Right, it's the one part where they skimmed. Yeah. I don't know.
They had plenty of time for Jordan Peele to come in and choose some scenery, but they gave him a pass. Yeah. Anyway, so new listeners and old, we would now traditionally do our Serling style intros. I guess it's this
is the one thing that separates us from the 25 Twilight Zone podcasts that have popped up since we stopped, I suppose.
And we're still doing them. We're going to do our sort of Serling Peele style intros. Who wants to go first?
Mine is extremely pedestrian and relatively short since I wrote it on my car drive home from work today.
Did you write it a little too busy?
Yeah, I worked it out in my head, and then I stopped and pulled over and wrote a little note so I wouldn't forget it.
You pulled over?
Well, once I was in a neighborhood.
Oh, okay. Got it. I'd love to imagine you speeding down the highway and peeling off.
I just hit the hazards on the highway. I was like, you'll wait. More important things here.
I gotta get this down.
Please welcome to the stage Mr. Samir Wassan, a second-rate stand-up with no confirmed kills to his credit. When he is presented with the opportunity for comedy immortality, Mr. Wassan will learn that comedy is no laughing matter, especially at the Tuesday night open mic night. $5 gets you 5 great comics, and ladies always get in free in the Twilight Zone.
That actually kind of just felt like an actual intro.
Yeah, I know. There was essentially no jokes. But, as I said, Fred, I wrote it while driving home from work between two obligations. Yeah,
Between two obligations, one of which being this podcast.
Oh, life is hard. Okay.
Yeah, okay, here's one. A great man once said that comedy is tragedy plus time. It, of course, then follows that tragedy is comedy plus negative time. And a negative time is just what our hero Samir Wassan is having, as he bombs his way through a Rachel Madawian comedy routine on stage for a crowd of extras. Despite featuring literally every night at what appears to be the most lavish comedy club in the world, Samir is a horrible failure. That is, until he gets ominous comedy pointers from Tracy Morgan. What happens next will surprise you, for about 3 minutes. Then the story continues for an hour, in the Twilight Zone.
Now that was just a little bit more plot summary worked into our.
You officially don't need to watch the episode after you heard that intro. All right, well, we've already spoiled it, but we're going to spoil it some more. If you haven't watched the episode and you're listening to a podcast about the episode for some reason, or you don't want to be spoiled, hit pause right now and go check it out. But we are about to dive into the plot, which begins with a cool shot.
Oh, Fred, if I could.
Yes.
Normally we have the patented seal of approval iTunes clean rating.
Right.
I'm not confident I'm going to be able to go through with the bleep machine on this. I might, but I might not.
Okay.
So, for all the people who, gather around the radio with their family to listen to the Twilight Pwn, you might want to put the kiddos to bed a little early tonight.
Exactly. Put that Ovaltine away and toddle off to bed and sit tight. Yeah, I agree. This might be hard to do clean.
We're working blue tonight. This is the late show.
Right. All right. So, as I was saying, the episode opens with sort of a cool shot. It's the back wall of a comedy club. And it's a mural of faces, like an audience. One of whom has a sort of pig-looking nose. Did you jump on that?
I didn't notice that. I was kind of focused. I thought they had a Serling-looking dude in the mural. But maybe I just was wanting to see a Serling-looking dude.
Maybe. Maybe I was just wanting to see a pig
Maybe we'll have
face.
to go to the footage.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought there was a woman who had sort of a piggy type of nose, but maybe that's just because I'm a judgmental person. But anyway, we peel back from that and we see this sort of nice, lavish comedy club, and a comedian played by Kumail Nanjiani named Samir is doing a bad routine.
Hot button political content.
Yes, it's kind of like MSNBC, just with light comedic timing, basically.
He's going for, was it Jon Stewart who coined the term the clapter?
It's political. He's talking about the Second Amendment. But it's intentionally presented as bad. The jokes aren't landing with the audience.
Now, at first, I'm kind of into it because this whole joke's not going over well. That's our vibe. Yeah. That's what we aim.
I know. So it felt quite familiar. At the very end of it, he lands on a line and, he does the, please clap.
Kind of might end up being my review of the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely reminded me of moments in the podcast where, one of us tells a joke and, the other one doesn't perceive that it is a joke.
I think those overwhelmingly go towards me, but yes, I'm very familiar with those moments.
Got it. Anyway, so he gets off stage and he's at the bar talking to a lady comedian about his huge bomb. The basic vibe is that he wants to make people think with his comedy, and she's just sort of you're just not funny. There's this sort of vague reference to this other comedian, sort of like a, I don't know, what kind of type is he? Sort of like a short, pudgy comedian in a Hawaiian shirt. Who is that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if what's that name of that group that's Jeff Foxworthy and Larry the Cable Guy? What are they called?
Comedians?
Blue collar. I don't know if it's quite them. It's kind of more it's not like the shock jock.
There's got to be some
Jim Norton. I don't know. Just kind of the more hostile, white misogynist brand of comedy is kind of, I think, what he's bringing to the table.
Right. Search iTunes for hostile misogynist comedy. Yeah. I mean, he's a short, pudgy dude in a Hawaiian shirt who makes kind of dick jokes and women jokes, basically.
Yeah.
I'm sure that is a person, but it's presented sort of as a type. Anyway, there's a vague reference made to that guy who's apparently a funny comedian, but apparently he accidentally killed someone. There's a sort of ominous little foreshadowing bit there.
And did you notice his name, Fred?
No.
In the show?
What was it?
Joe Donner.
Okay.
I couldn't help but wonder if that's some kind of vague Joe Don Baker reference.
I don't think so.
I reached out to the writer of the show, but we haven't gotten a response yet.
Did you actually?
Oh, yeah. But of course he was smart. He kept stumm. Okay. He knows that he doesn't want the Baker estate on his ass.
Right, exactly. Wait, how did you reach out to him?
He's on Twitter.
Oh, I see.
We have a Twitter feed.
Oh, I see. Okay, I haven't looked at it in 3 months, so...
we love you, fans.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so, he and Dee Dee trade, low-key zingers. And then the scene ends on the line Rod Serling wish he could have written.
More good talk. Hey, could you put that all in an email and send it to the ocean?
Yeah, sure. Hey, could you suck my...
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of similar to 30 Fathoms.
Because Rod Serling did like to write a good insult. I mean, it is hard to imagine Uncle Simon ending on suck my...
I mean, maybe a soft buckled shoe was the 60s equivalent of suck my... I don't know.
We have to use the bleep for that, please. I know it's going to be annoying, but please use the bleep for that. Anyway, so after that barbed exchange, we meet our next character, played by Tracy Morgan. It's a comedian, sort of like a legendary comedian named J.C. Wheeler.
I was kind of excited. I was like, is he going to be the modern Jonathan Winters,
Like a game of pool type of thing?
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's kind of positioned as this... obviously great figure, quasi-mystical, but he didn't really go the same direction as a game of pool, but that was what I was hoping for right there.
Yeah.
He seems Tracy Morgan seems like a guy who could be a modern day Jonathan Winters in a way.
It sounds weird to say, but there's something kind of classic about Tracy Morgan. Is that wrong to say? I don't know.
I was going the other direction. I think there's something, it sounds a little much, but a little almost unhinged, a little crazy about Tracy Morgan and his comedy, and that's totally the Jonathan Winters thing. So I was like, yeah, that's a good pairing.
That's a good point, yeah. I don't know. He feels, it's weird because when you think oh, they're making a new Twilight Zone, Tracy Morgan stars in an episode. That sounds weird, but it actually kind of makes sense in a weird way.
Yeah, and I think he works in this. So.
Yeah. Anyway, so he plays this sort of legendary comedian named J.C. Wheeler. I don't know. I just love his little Sorry
I didn't capture this because you've already used it with me multiple times now. This is your new catchphrase.
I don't know. Just something about okay, so Samira says J.C. Wheeler, and Tracy Morgan says, in the fleshy flesh. And I don't know, just something about a catchphrase for a comedian that doesn't exist is just something kind of painfully unfunny that makes it funny.
Part of me wonders, once you keyed in on it, if that was a Tracy Morgan improv. So I'll continue to pester the writer of this episode until he cracks.
We're going to get to the bottom of this. We really need to team up with Martin Grams because I feel like Grams has the private investigative skills to really get to the truth. So J.C. Wheeler is telling Samir to back off the political material and focus more on personal stuff.
What do you want? You happy with your life? With your career? Don't you want it all?
Yes, more than anything.
You have one thing, one natural resource. You are a country with one export, and you are the export. I tell you a secret. Put yourself out there, and you will get last. You will be successful. Are you sure that's what you want?
Yes.
Now you have to be sure, because once you put it out there, the audience will take it in. They will connect. And once they connect to it, it's theirs. And once it's theirs, that shit is gone forever.
In the fleshy flesh.
I don't know how much like comedy podcasts you've listened to, but this whole thing, it had that navel gazing comedy vibe. Wait,
I'm very like anti-comedy these days in general. The whole thing of like turning comedy into this, you know, there's the comedy and then there's the podcasts about doing comedy, right, and then there's like the podcasts about comedy podcasts. Right. It's just turned into this weird like cottage industry of like comedy content that's not necessarily funny. As you can probably tell, it's sort of a bone to pick of mine. But yes, I agree. It has this weird like, man, like problems that everyone can relate to. Telling stand-up jokes about your girlfriend and her getting mad. That's a great idea for a Twilight Zone episode.
Like you said, it's become like such a weird part of a subculture. Like, yeah. I guess there is a target market for this now, but it did feel like, as opposed to ripped from the headlines, this felt very ripped from the podcast.
Right, exactly. I also found it just kind of funny because there's this ominous music, you know, underscoring this speech that he's giving, which basically is just like day one of level 1 improv speech. Like, it doesn't sound particularly ominous.
Or like any writing, it's usually like, you know, come from the heart, etc. But I did find this distillation of why people get into comedy amusing.
But you don't choose comedy because you want to find life. You choose comedy because you want it all.
That's why we got into this podcast, right, Fred?
This echoes like when we met up at that bar to discuss starting the Twilight Zone podcast.
We got a broken piece of glass and like cut our hands and put it together. So we want it all.
Let's set up an iTunes account. The world is ours.
I'll bother every person who's ever mentioned the Twilight Zone on Twitter because I don't understand how to use Twitter.
I want it all. So they cheers on that, and it seems like something magical has happened because the music tells us that. And then Samir gets on stage again. Apparently this comedian who consistently bombs justifies like 2 sets at the nicest comedy club in the world.
Well, you live in New York. I assume you've gone to some comedy clubs here and there.
Yeah.
You know, it is not at the caliber, but, you know, I had a brief run doing some stand-up in prep for my movie, and I went to all the different rooms in Austin, and like, this room's ridiculous. Yeah. It's like crazy nice, and if you suck, you're gonna get like maybe 5 minutes on an open mic, or, you know, you're not getting multiple features.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just so absurd.
The average market for the level of comedy that he's doing is like the basement of a bar on a Tuesday at 6 p.m. This is like the Four Seasons, essentially. Maybe that's intentional, though. It's like trying to create like a slightly alternate reality, you know?
Or to push back. I mean, you know, I don't want to be like nitpicking things that are obviously intentional choices, and as much as the production design on this is very well done. I mean, if it were like the kind of club this guy should be in, it probably would not look as sumptuous.
And also might just have a different feel. Like, you know, to create this sort of like elevated, heightened reality.
Sure.
Like, it would be a little bit weird if it was like UCB theater or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, so he takes the stage for the second set, and he's going to do his political routine about the Second Amendment. But then he switches over halfway through to make bad jokes about his dog, and they start to kill. It's weird because, like, you start to see that maybe something mystical is going on, but the dog jokes aren't funny, right? Like, that's right.
It was confusing at first. I think over the many iterations of this sequence, it became clear. But at first, it was confusing. Like, did the writers think this was funny and wanted this, or like? I mean, the caterpillar, I think makes clear. Like, no, but. And, like, that was something I very much wrestled with, is, like, is this good in that it feeds into the off-center, kind of weird, kind of uncomfortable vibe, or is it just lazy and the writer doesn't have to write funny jokes?
Yeah.
Probably. I get the intentionality, but it also just means you end up having to watch lots of unfunny comedy.
Yeah.
It's not like painfully unfunny, it's just like mediocre, which is like blah.
Yeah, mediocre comedy is almost worse.
One of my favorite things in the world is seeing someone bomb horribly. Like, mediocre comedy is so boring, but when you can see someone really bomb, it's painful, it's sad, but it's hilarious. And this is just like, so much of it's just like, mediocre.
Yeah. I dated someone for 7 years who was like...
Oh, yes.
What?
I forgot that you had dated someone who was deep into the performing comedy scene.
Yes. I mean, like every night at UCB in the Ped. And so I'm... I feel like I've done my time in the trenches of seeing bad comedy, so I feel like I no longer have the taste for it. Like my taste buds have been burned. So maybe some of this not liking comedy stuff might be coming from personal experience. But anyway, Samir gets back home and he tells his girlfriend about his great routine. She's sleeping in bed, and he's looking for his dog to take it for a walk, but the dog is missing. And remember, John, that he did the routine about his dog. And Tracy Morgan said that when you do routine about personal stuff, it doesn't belong to you anymore, and now the dog is missing, John.
Let's not jump to conclusions, Fred. I think we're going to need a couple more cycles before we can...
really get what's going on. Yeah.
Now, this might be a Twilight Zone first. I can't honestly remember, but I watched this episode with my wife.
Okay.
I think, like, the first time he was like, "Cat," she was like, "Oh, I get it." So, someone who I don't think's watched any Twilight Zone immediately was like, I get the premise of this episode. I know how it's going to work out.
Yeah.
And we're like, 12 minutes in to an hour-long episode, so that's good.
You kind of even sense it before he even gets home, I don't know. Maybe our ears are just more attuned to Twilight Zone-y stuff, but like...
Again, fair.
Yeah, certainly it was not a deep shock that, this idea of talking about stuff in his routine and it disappearing. But anyway, that's what happens.
Give it credit. It feels right in the wheelhouse of a Twilight Zone premise.
Yeah.
It's not a bad one.
Right. His dog is missing. His girlfriend doesn't even remember the dog ever having existed. He goes to bed. And then we get Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone intro. Now, it's sort of interesting because, the two reboots, the 80s and the 2000s one, they didn't have a host who was on camera. So this is the first time since Serling that we've had our host on camera. So this, there's a lot riding on this. This is definitely the moment that I felt most personally excited for. What about you?
I'm very glad that they went to the effort to integrate him into the actual scenes, which I think is, one of the most enjoyable parts about the Serling intros. I mean, I think the early first season and the fourth season where he's not actually in the scenes are nowhere near as enjoyable.
It would have been funny if they'd put Jordan Peele just in front of a green screen somewhere.
Sorry, he was teaching classes in Ithaca. Yeah, that's the best we could do. Anyway, he really wanted to get into the role.
So what did you think? Do you think he did a good performance?
Yeah, I think he was totally fine. Yeah. I did see... It sounded like some people online maybe had an issue just because they so associate him with Key and Peele, and I've seen like a handful of Key and Peele and think it's really funny. It's like one of those things I've always meant to go and watch all of it, and I've not. I think if I like really had him in my head as a funny person, it might be a little jarring, but
I have watched a lot of Key and Peele, but I don't know, it didn't bother me. I thought he did a good job. Anyway, and we also get the new credit sequence. And did you notice how they changed the peak of man's knowledge to the peak of one's knowledge? Libtards.
I thought it was TZ, not SJ. W.
Okay. Maybe we should cut that. Moving right along. Samir is at the comedy club again, and there's a bus stop outside of the comedy club that's called Franklin. Now, did you think that was a reference to The Fever?
You know what? I didn't, but that's absolutely a reference to The Fever. Good catch, Fred.
Do you actually think it is, or am I just...
Oh, yeah.
There? Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it. I think it has to be.
It's where that misogynistic comedian apparently hit a woman and killed her in a drunk driving incident. So that's that and little thread. Yes, and a child. Good point, and a child. Samir's girlfriend's nephew, Devin, is helping him put up posters for his lost dog, even though it's clear that the dog never existed. And, we as the audience know that, but Samir doesn't. So Samir takes his girlfriend's nephew into the comedy club, and he's up on stage doing his bad act. And then Samir starts making fun of his nephew, and the crowd goes wild, even though it continues that his supposedly good act that's making people laugh is actually really not that funny. And then, as you'd expect, his nephew disappeared.
When he started joking on Devlin, I was like, wait, is this malicious? Which, it becomes clear it's not, which means I was rushing ahead to like a beat that they're not going to hit for another 15 minutes now.
Yeah.
We're going to be up on this stage quite a few times while he works through this premise.
Wait, did you say his name was Devlin? Isn't it just Devin?
Did I say Devlin?
Yeah.
Didn't mean to.
We can roll the tape back and check it. So Samir goes back home, and his girlfriend doesn't even remember who Devin was. Also, there's this new character, like a mentor of his girlfriend, who's a lawyer. He's kind of a whole side note. I don't know. He reminded me of me, sort of, to some degree. He's a pretentious guy in glasses. So yeah.
As all law professors do, he's having a romantic dinner with the girlfriend discussing comedy.
She had a job, right? Like, she wasn't still in law school.
No,
right?
he was the mentor, so they still had, like, maintained a relationship. Well, this doesn't make a lot of sense as we go forward, but I got the impression she was the breadwinner.
Right. So do you still have, like, candlelit white wine dinners with your law school mentors, or?
I mean, if I lived in Charlottesville, I might. There's some that, of course, but distance, not desire, Fred.
Did you actually have like mentors in law school?
I know people who did.
Right.
My big activity was the law school play.
Right. Well, also the paper. Also the school paper. I'd love it if your law school mentor was just the custodian of the theater or whatever.
I did not have that relationship, but I don't think it's inherently crazy. I do know people who are much more close to
I didn't necessarily think it was crazy. I just wanted to bring up the law school play again because it's been...
I seem to remember someone who would still meet up for drinks with an NYU professor
that is true.
Long after the class had ended.
That is true.
I don't have to name drop about New York Times best-selling authors that you may have met with.
May or may not have star F'd, yes. Yeah, that is true. Good point. So Samir's girlfriend doesn't remember her nephew, so that's obviously disturbing. And at this point, Samir seems to realize what's going on. Like, he gets the premise of the episode, basically. And then they continue to talk while the law professor guy kind of, like, tosses out on-the-nose comments about comedy. Like, clearly the law school professor listens to comedy podcasts because he's got a lot of, like, you got to sacrifice for your art, or, like, kind of stuff to say. And then Samir's girlfriend kind of gives him some, I would say, objectively bad advice. He's like, I'm having a mental breakdown. And she's like, well, if you're getting laughs, keep going for it. Like, I don't know. It's sort of a weird little moment that doesn't quite work.
Let me keep the compliment sandwich going while I can. Okay. I do think Kumail did a good job of portraying a realistic version of a person caught in a Twilight Zone circumstance. Like the part where he was worried about, like, I forget if he said, like, don't commit me or I don't want to go to the hospital or something. Like, I thought he did a decent job of conveying, like, oh, God, I must be going crazy because of this situation. So,
oh, yeah.
Little feather in his...
I was generally pretty into the acting. I don't feel like anybody delivered a bad performance. There's Samir gets back to the comedy club. It's kind of funny. It really is just the same three comedians every night at this place,
which is packed.
Yeah,
every night to see three comedians, one of whom everyone hates, on a rotating basis.
Kind of like a weird high concept comedy club. He starts doing his same political bit. It tanks, and then he decides to talk about his nephew again because he knows, like, his nephew's already disappeared. So no harm in that. But that also tanks. So he learns that he can't talk about someone who's already disappeared. So then he tries to talk about the president. Wonder which president he's talking about, John.
I mean, it could be a period piece. We don't know that, Fred. We don't have the information.
A 2011 period piece. Anyway, so he talks about the president. That tanks too, so he has to talk about something personal. So then he decides to talk about the fat comedian, the misogynist guy. And everyone just starts laughing and goes crazy. Joe Donner disappears. So, he's putting his power to, I guess you could say, good, because the lady and baby who, the fat comedian killed came back to life. So that's good.
We're kind of working out in pretty thorough details how this mechanism works. But honestly, as this proceeds, it kind of left me with some questions, in as much as why exactly does Donner and some of the other people work when the president doesn't? I mean, Tracy Morgan tells him it's got to be something from your personal life, but does that literally just mean you have to have met them? I don't get the impression that he and Joe Donner are buddies. They just work the same club. So
I would say the simplest thing is someone he met, but then again, later in the episode, it seems like that's not the case.
Yeah,
it is.
People he just met who he's directly addressing later will work. So I don't know. I feel like they were trying to clearly explain it, but I had questions that I didn't want answered because it was so long. But I still had some questions.
I mean, it's kind of funny because the episode, if nothing else, is a long explanation of the contours of his power, because it's like, they set up this premise, which is kind of, cute. And then they're like, it works in this case, but it doesn't work in this case, but it sort of works here. But then it often, you can't do, and it's like, okay, we get it.
Yeah. They could have whiteboarded it a bit more.
Yeah. Just a few more hours of explaining this power, and I think we would be in good shape. We go into montage land here. Samir is looking through his Facebook friends, trying to find people he wants to send to the cornfield.
Did you catch the ref, Fred? Did you catch the ref?
I don't know if I caught the ref, John. What's the ref?
One of his Facebook friends was named Henry Corwin, Fred. Night of the Meek. Santa, Art Carney.
Okay. I did not catch the ref. Do you like that stuff? I don't know if I like that stuff.
I think there is a need for it for sad people like us.
Yeah. It just feels like, I don't know, just like, here's something for you, little SOBs. Like, I guess I would have been disappointed if there were like 0 Easter eggs, but like I looked, there was an online list of all these. I didn't read the whole thing, but like the comedian is drinking like Canomit beer or whatever, and I'm just like, come on, like.
Here's the thing.
Okay.
In the same way that you didn't notice the Henry Corwin,
right?
It doesn't hurt your experience if you don't notice it, and if you do want to go and dig around, then most people who would get the reference will enjoy that.
Right.
It's rare the person who will go digging for Easter eggs and then be angry that why are all these damn eggs here?
Yeah, I know. It's a good point. Who left all these damn eggs lying around? That's actually a very good point. I wonder the volume of people who are annoyed by the fact that who noticed that Henry Corwin was a name from the Twilight Zone and were annoyed by it is exactly one, and it's me. So there's a montage of him looking through his Facebook friends trying to get material for his routine, and he's, at this point it's very clear that the actual jokes don't have to be funny. People just will go crazy and laugh at them no matter what. In the midst of all this, Samir is getting famous, and his girlfriend apparently loves him now, which is cool.
I think there's a reference dropped at some point in this about how he's now got like 500,000 Twitter followers, and it's like, how does one acquire 500,000 followers from only doing a brand new set at the same club like every night?
Word gets around, John. Word gets around.
It's been established he's not very funny and he can't get laughs from a joke that's repeated twice. Unless 500,000 people have cycled through that club, I don't know how he's getting these people.
I don't know.
Unless it's like all bots who are jumping on.
Exactly. In the montage they skipped over the part where he spent his money to buy fake followers. It's implied. In the midst of all this, it's confirmed that Samir's girlfriend is a defense attorney, and she's leaving the club to go have dinner with the pretentious mentor we met earlier.
Right.
And Samir's jealous of that, and they get into a fight about it, and because he's famous now, he's a prick. So later at the comedy club, this is where the power does get a little murky, because earlier he saw a skinhead on the bus.
Right.
And so he's trying to throw that guy into the cornfield, but apparently that doesn't work, because I guess he didn't meet that person. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it was a little hazy because in the footage we see of the flashback, they just kind of stared at each other, but in the story he tells, he did get his name, so I don't know if he was
was he making up the name? Or?
I didn't know if he was actually guessing at the name, or if to make the rules as clean or fit together. I think that's what happened. He must have just seen the guy but not had any actual interaction, or they seem to make a big deal out of naming the person. Once you say their name, that I don't know. Whatever reason, that's a little too distant.
Yeah.
Joe Donner, because he's bellied up to the bar with him night after night, even if they've never actually talked. That's okay.
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, there is something maybe about the fact that you actually have to name the person, because I don't know, that maybe could be meaningful, because it's if let's say you're doing a comedy routine, you just talk about oh, this person, that's different than actually like naming them and really
Right.
putting them out there, you know?
There are multiple times throughout where it's very clear, like, the naming of the person is the important part. And I mean, that has, like, some basis in, you know, mythology and stories dating back, and naming people gives you power. Blah, blah, blah.
Down and
Go ahead.
down and down to the very... Anyway, so the skinhead thing is not working. And so Samir decides, gets sort of a little evil grin on his face. So he switches over to dunking on the law professor, who's now going to the cornfield. Before, he was like going through people he knew to be evil, because apparently he had like 500 evil friends on Facebook. I mean, I've got like 5, but certainly not as many as he did.
That shows he must be like the kind of guy who's never cold. He's never like unfollowed his high school people that he's not actually friends with.
Right,
So.
all the murderers he knew in high school. This is the first time he's kind of like very deliberately using it in a malicious way.
From a screenwriting structure standpoint, this comes like right at 30 minutes into an hour-long episode, so it's a good midpoint twist. He's now using the magical power for evil.
Right.
So we're on like the downward slide from here on out.
Right. And then he gets off stage, and Dee Dee, the lady comedian, is showing him on her phone that he made this top comedians to follow list. And what I love is that it's on the NewYorker.com. Did you see that?
I didn't see that part.
It's so amazing. It's something about like, oh my God, you made top comedians to follow on the NewYorker.com? Like, is that really what stand-up comedians are like dying to get to?
And again, I think we're missing the point when we fixate on this, but it's clearly established the jokes only work in the moment once. So like, what are people getting on his Twitter feed that they want to follow? Like,
it's true. But I don't know. Just something about the fact that it's in New York. It was the like new petitions against tax of this episode for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he disappeared, the pretentious law professor, so he's no more. But when he meets up with his girlfriend after the very successful show, it turns out that she's not actually a defense attorney anymore. She's a waitress. And they make a joke about this, but it is a little bit like, okay, so the one mentor is the reason why she's a lawyer as opposed to a waitress? Like, wouldn't she just be like a finance person or something like that? I don't know. Like, I feel like the people the people who are like one mentor away from being either a successful lawyer or being a waitress, I don't know.
You know, it's for the dramatic stakes. I get it. It's fine, but it's also, we're now like 35 to 40 minutes in, and before Samir has to learn like, oh, there could be unintended consequences to the action. Right. Like, it has ripple effects. I never thought of that.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And indeed, one of the ripple effects is that, I guess just because like of the fact that she never went to law school, they never went on this trip, which means their relationship is very different, and she breaks up with him and in that moment, so that's a bummer. But back at the comedy club, things are going well, because that night there's going to be a casting agent in the audience from something called the Gower Hour.
Candy Gower from the Gower Hour is coming to the late set tonight.
Okay.
And she is here for you two.
Two?
You didn't hear this from me. But the Gower Hour needs a new cast member. And it's pretty much narrowed down to 2 up-and-coming comics you may have heard of. And you.
Maybe it's my New Yorker here. Like, it did amuse me that the best brass ring they could come up with was being a featured player on an SNL knockoff.
Why was it called the Gower Hour?
The host was Candy Gower. Why is the Carol Burnett show called the Carol Burnett show?
Right. I know, but it's funny because it's not even SNL. Like, it wasn't like someone like was saying like, there's someone here from like weekend comedy show, you know. It was
I took it to be like, this is our universe's SNL.
Why would no? But I disagree with that, because wouldn't it be called something like weekend comedy as opposed to the Gower Hour? Suggests something more like the Carol Burnett show.
Isn't the Carol Burnett show kind of the SNL? Well, I guess
we are getting down a rabbit hole here. Let's keep moving. So this, you know,
I was very much amused by just the concept that the Gower Hour was.
I know. That's the brass ring. It doesn't get any better than that.
One spot on the Gower Hour.
I mean, it's got a good little theme song.
I know. She's got good jingle making skills there.
I did kind of wonder. I feel like I read somewhere, I don't know if it was Bryan Cranston on Breaking Bad or someone. There's someone in the show who like he was tasked with humming. Like his character was supposed to hum, but you can't hum an actual tune because then you have to like license them. So like he hummed original things, but then he ended up getting like royalties for his humming. Like I did wonder, like did that actress come up with that? Like is she gonna get paid? Because that was a pretty good little beat.
Yeah, that is cool. Maybe I'll make a jingle out of that for the outro or something. But yeah, anyway, so they're squaring off to get the comedy Oscar of appearing on the Gower Hour. Samir takes the stage, and it's weird they like stretch this out over 2 routines. It's like there's someone there from the Gower Hour, so you better do good, and then like he does good, but then it's like you have to do it again. That was confusing.
That part was actually super confusing because he goes out, does well, and then like has a crisis of conscience where he talks about like he's gonna throw it, and she tells him not to. I was very confused by that, but I also, by this point, was getting relatively tired.
Yeah,
so.
Got it. I mean, it was 8:30, so... yeah, I mean, and I also feel like there's another escalation problem, too, because he's like gets heckled by some hedge fund guys, and then he sends them to the cornfield, but it's like, at this point, he's already, like, killed his girlfriend's nephew, like some random law professor. Like, hedge fund guys doesn't add to that. So, yeah, backstage, Samir is squaring off with Dee Dee, the female comedian, to, win this comedy brass ring of being on the Gower Hour. Boom, cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. And she takes the stage, and Samir gets another visitation from the ghost of Christmas J.C. Wheeler. Tracy Morgan is back, and Samir's having a crisis of confidence. He doesn't know, or crisis of conscience rather. He doesn't know whether he can kill any more people with his comedy routine. He's not.
We've all been there,
right? Exactly. And J.C. Wheeler kind of like talks him through it and is like, "I thought this is what you really wanted." And plus, you didn't really kill anybody.
I warned you what would happen if you put stuff out there.
You did not tell me I was going to be murdering people.
Murdering people? Now, who the hell is murdering people? You can't murder people who never existed.
That's semantics.
There are no crime moms. It's not murder if there are no crime moms. See, that's the criteria for murder. Willful, premeditated, crime moms. But what? These people were never born. Now, you might think you remember them, but you're incorrect. They're gone. They're gone. They are gone.
I think Tracy Morgan was wise to clear out the criminal law professor mentor and the woman with the legal degree before he laid out his theory of murder.
Right, exactly. I'm not sure that would hold up in court. Did you get the there's no crying in baseball from that as well? was I the only one who flashed back to A League of Their Own on that?
No, that wasn't where my head went, but it was fine.
I always like to flash back to A League of Their Own. So Samir's kind of got this last little pep talk from J.C. Wheeler. So he goes back on stage and he starts killing, literally. He's naming old Facebook friends, high school friends, teachers, all kinds of people. And...
I mean, here, I'm just going to give people a taste. This goes on. I think I only captured half of it, and I don't think I'm even going to play all that, but...
Karen Conroy, she broke my heart! Lindy Appleman, what a bad Johnny McBride! She didn't even know I was alive! Bye-bye! This is Karen from Westlake High! B+, you're gone! Sarah Fullman! Oh,
okay, so that was 20 seconds of a minute-long clip that I don't think captured all of it, which was kind of indicative of a lot of the clips that and we haven't even done all of them. There were a number of clips where it was like, oh, that's a good little bit, and then I'd get it and it'd be a minute and a half long.
Yeah.
He's going nuts.
Yep. He's going nuts, saying names, and the names are getting laughs, and all those people are dying. And at the very apex of this, his girlfriend appears and starts booing him, giving him the Princess Bride treatment. And she dares him to wipe her away, which is weird that she knows this premise all of a sudden. I found that a little confusing.
Well, I don't think she flat out knew the premise. I think you can read it as you're not being genuinely funny. She said, I had the clip, but I didn't end up putting it in here. She basically is like, oh, this is just names. You're just tearing people down. You're just right. Basically, I think you can read it as all you are doing is making fun of people to get success and make yourself feel better about yourself. I mean, we as the audience who understand the premise can also read it as you're just,
Oh, okay.
killing people, but I think it's supposed to be able to read both ways.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because at this point you're just, the premise is so strong, and also because the audience is laughing at non-funny jokes, it already kind of seems non-real to some degree.
Right.
So you kind of, I don't know. It was a confusing moment, but whatever. Clearly we get...
Oh, and then we get one of my favorite moments of the episode.
I hear this kid kills hecklers. This is gonna be good.
I don't know. Someone earned a SAG card. I'm happy.
It's something about it. It just felt like a line from like a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie or something like that, where like he plays a stand-up comedian who like kills people. Like it kind of like excuse my friend, he's dead tired. Obviously, the dilemma here is, does Samir, send his ex-girlfriend to the cornfield, or what does he do? And it seems like he's about to. He sets it up real good. But then...
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I want to talk to you about myself.
And honestly, that goes for another minute, but A, people should watch the episode on their own, so I don't want to like ruin it all, and B, we kind of get where that's going.
Yeah, he deletes himself.
And it ends with because he has disappeared, it ends with an actual, literal mic drop.
That's a good point.
How'd you feel about that?
I don't know. I didn't have strong feelings about it.
Oh, I had the little...
Yeah?
That's how I felt when I saw it. I was like,
okay, they did that.
Okay.
Yeah,
mic drop, okay.
Anyway, so he's deleted and he's in the cornfield and everybody's back, and I guess that means the mother and the child died in the bus in the car crash. So they didn't really talk about that. But the Samir's girlfriend and his nephew are back, and they're at the comedy club praising Dee Dee for doing a great job. So he's just totally gone at this point. And then Dee Dee sees J.C. Wheeler and the fleshy flesh. and the whole cycle begins anew. And then we peel back to that mural that was on the back wall of the comedy club, and we see that Samir has joined the ranks of the people in the mural.
And then we get the Jordan Peele outro.
Samir Wassan learned the hard way that sometimes getting everything you want means losing everything you love. And after finally finding himself on the verge of becoming somebody, he chose instead to once again be a nobody. In the end, Samir's final encore is a show you can only buy a ticket to in the Twilight Zone.
As we've discussed, when the dog disappears, you know exactly what will happen, and indeed, that proceeds to happen. I kind of feel like I have exactly the same things to say about it as I would if it was a fourth season episode of the original TZ. Like, cute enough little story, well told, I guess. Wish it had been half an hour. What do you think?
Yeah, when we watched it, the length didn't bother me quite as much the first time I watched it, but in preparing for the episode and going through and gathering clips, which, again, this is another piece of it, in gathering clips, I just had the audio in front of me, and it felt real long doing that. So I think one of the things that we didn't convey very much here is the visual aspect. It is, and I think this is something we can discuss, but at a baseline level, it's very well shot and very stylish, and so it's like enjoyable to look at, and I like the actors, and I think they're, like you said, the performances are good, so it kind of snuck by, but like I wouldn't not want to have to sit down and watch it again because it is so long. And when you think about it, and you like, it really does just take a premise and think, let's look at this from every single possible angle.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
And like, even the individual scenes, a scene could be 2 minutes, they're 5, just consistently. It just, it's very, very fleshy.
Yeah,
fleshy
exactly.
Flesh.
I feel like it reads like a Twilight Zone episode written by like a particularly precocious high school student. It hits all the right notes. It's Twilight Zone-y, but it's kind of obvious, and it sort of like thinks it's deeper than it actually is. Like, you have this concept of like comedians really, or artists or whoever, people who tell narrative stories really put themselves out there, and they put out people from their personal life, and they bleed for their audiences, and there's like a cost to that. And what if we literalize that? And that's not a bad idea for a thing, but it's like, I don't know if it's that deep, you know? Like, it's just like, okay, got it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's totally fair. I think there are a number of classic Twilight Zone concepts that are as deep as that. Like, I think I agree.
I think
don't
they're
think it's
Twilight
like
Zone
crazy
concepts
profound, but
yeah, I think they're Twilight Zone concepts that are much less deep than that. I
Yeah,
mean, certainly.
yeah, I mean,
I don't have a problem with it as a starting point. It's just like I don't know that they explored it any deeper than that short summation I just gave, and I feel like the length and also maybe the expectation that it's like made by Jordan Peele, who's great, and it's happening now. I don't know. I just wanted something a little bit more than that. And maybe just the fact that you had this sort of like navel-gazy comedians talking about the perils of comedy thing.
That part kind of made me less happy. I don't know. I will say when I walked away, I was thinking, well, you know, is this a 4-bore? I wouldn't say I was like actually bored watching it. I will say it was too long.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was engaged. I don't know. I don't know how to quite square that circle. Like, I wish it were shorter, but I didn't feel like some of the 4-season episodes of like, oh God, please just...
The parallel it ain't.
No.
I had more problems with that. I felt like another aspect of it that was sort of weirdly weakly sketched is like him as a character, like Samir as a character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, later on, it's like he's dying to succeed and he'll do anything, even kill people. But like, at the very beginning, it seems like more of his struggle is like he wants to like be political. Like, if he's really dying so hard to get laughs and that's all he cares about, he would have already tried not being political, you know? The political thing just kind of goes out the window. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, they do establish him as some kind of like comedy purist, but yeah, that's like weird lip service that doesn't really get explored, or like there's no way... I don't know if there's a thing, but like there's no attempt to try and work that for him to try and work that within his new power.
Yeah, I mean, like if you were to start over, you'd probably want it to just be like a unfunny comedian who's not successful. Like the political thing is almost like a sideline, you know? It's more about like his desire to be successful and selling out his friends, less so about like sticking to principles, you know?
I think that leads to a little bit of a muddled characterization. I think there are some notes where like the girlfriend and her relationship to him seems to kind of veer in different directions depending on the needs of the scene. But I guess you could argue, well, like reality keeps shifting, so maybe her reaction to things changes a little bit.
Yeah.
I to kind of shift the discussion a little bit, just talking about the visual a little more.
Yeah.
I wondered what your thoughts were, because for me, you know, we come into this club, it's super stylish, super stylized, and we're having like canted angles as he's walking up to the bar, and like even as he's just talking about, you know, political comedy versus personal comedy. I think even when he's talking with his friend before he even starts talking to Tracy Morgan, he's like half in shadow and blah blah blah, and it just made me think, when you actually go through and watch the original Twilight Zone, only a handful of the episodes are actually like that level of stylization. Like, I think it's so ingrained in our head that that's what Twilight Zone is, but it's really not there for most of it. So,
well,
I don't know. Did you? I mean, honestly, I feel like it would be weird for our expectations if a Twilight Zone reboot just shot the episode really straight and didn't do it. But it also is like kind of weird because it's like more true to our memory of the show than what the show really did.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
When like Shadow Play, obviously very stylish. Like The Obsolete Man, very stylish, but they're also like hyper realities. If the Twilight Zone in the 60s did a show set in a comedy club, I mean, it'd be like The Dummy. That didn't have like crazy canted angles the entire time.
The Dummy did have crazy canted angles.
Like eventually, but I don't think it was once the Twilight crazy premise hit, but like it wasn't like all in shadow or
no, I think that's a good point. I think basically like the aura or whatever you want to talk about of the Twilight Zone is this like creepy, noiry, canted, vibey thing, and that's like the feeling that you take away from the show if you just take it in total. And so then when you apply that to a contemporary show, it's like, oh, well, we got to make it a stylized, creepy, canted angle, weird vibes. Like, ignoring the fact that like part of the reason why the show was maybe so successful is because it was shot in a straightforward way and then broke into creepy stuff. You're right. Like it's the show, this episode is like creepy all the way through, you know what I mean? Or like it's stylized and creepy all the way through. It doesn't use the stylization to like follow the narrative in a clever way like some of the original Twilight Zones did.
Yeah. Thank you for summing up my point better than I could.
No, it's your point. I yield the point to you. Yeah.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Rockstar, Zachary, Mark Grams Jr., Zachary and Grams, and IMDB.
Well, it sounds like the internet has done a good job with the Easter eggs. I think, honestly, the only one that I caught on the fly was the Henry Corwin, but I did, see a couple more online. There's like supposedly you can see masks that look kind of like from the episode The Mask, and supposedly the dummy is in the back room. Yeah. I didn't notice that.
Was it Caesar or Willie?
I mean, I think that's crucial to find out.
Let's go to the tape.
The very end is like a pretty overt reference to The Shining, which is kind of odd.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think of that. Yeah.
And, to kind of hammer that in a strange way, like right before when he's going on his crazy person rant, he mentions like someone Torrance a couple times, which like right. Jack Torrance from The Shining. So I don't know. I'm not quite clear. Maybe you can mix universes, but it was a strange thing to crib when you've got like I don't know, it's like you've got the Marvel Cinematic Universe in front of you and like, let me squeeze in a Gatsby reference. Like what? I don't know. That's something else in pop culture, I guess.
I wonder if there is a Great Gatsby reference in all the because there are like 500 Marvel movies at this point.
I'm guessing people have gotten a little bit running out of ideas.
Yeah, I feel like Tony Stark probably like maybe, I don't know, maybe would throw like a good Gatsby theme party or something.
There are other Easter eggs if you're one of the idiots who likes that, right, Fred?
Who put all these damn eggs in my backyard?
Kumail Nanjiani played Samir Wasan. Maybe is best known as being the podcaster for the X-Files files, which I think this gives us all hope, Fred, that, with the right moxie, they might pick up, a couple of humble podcasters to be in the reboot of the Night Gallery.
Right.
We'll just get our CVs out there. He also wrote The Big Sick that came out last year, which was pretty darn good. He's been in Silicon Valley. He's part of that group of comedians that make the round on podcasts, etc. J.C. Wheeler was played by Tracy Morgan, who's, had a long comedy career, probably best known for SNL and 30 Rock. It's good to see him back out there. He was in a big car accident, I think, a couple years ago. So good to see him working. Rena was played by Amara Karan.
She was in the Darjeeling Brothers, right?
I almost emailed you to say, can you whip up an inevitable Wes Anderson connection on the fly?
Like a harpsichord.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly what I figured it would be. Dee Dee Scott was played by De'Ara Kyle Kilpatrick. And,
was she is she actually a stand-up comedian? Because she had like the vibe and cadence of a stand-up comedian.
She definitely had been in like lots of, comedic television and like web series, and so I would bet money that she's done some time either on the improv or the stand-up circuit.
Yeah, I will say that little boom chicka, that's like one of my favorite parts of the episode. That's the stage bread of this episode. The Gower.
Well, for me,
like 50 years from now, when like our grandkids are doing the laser internet's third most popular Twilight Zone podcast, they're gonna look back on the Gower Hour boom chicka as the stage bread of today.
One thing that this episode had that was very different than the original Twilight Zone was a cast of about 50 people.
Yeah, that's true.
So I did not key in on everyone, but I did go ahead and write down Brianna Rayner played Candy Gower because I was so excited about the Gower Hour. Miss Rayner is an improviser, voice actor, voice artist and actor, and a classic typewriter enthusiast.
Oh boy,
much like Tom Hanks.
Right? Was she the person who said like, this guy kills hecklers? Was that Candy Gower?
I don't know. That maybe that was her. I'm not sure. Written by Alex Rubens. He worked with Jordan Peele on Key and Peele and Keanu. He wrote for Community. He's written for a bunch of shows. He doesn't always respond to fans quickly on Twitter. So
nail him for that one.
Directed by Owen Harris, who who is a British director. He's done a variety of television, including 2 Black Mirror episodes. So
yeah, that makes sense.
you can see why, I would be not surprised at all if someone who worked in the crew for this had some role in the MST3K reboot, but frankly, I didn't have the time or the inclination to go through every single person who had touched this show to find out.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to.
It's kind of easier, like in the the late 50s, early 60s, when like 30 people made a TV show.
Right.
Now 30 people is like the catering.
IMDb gave this episode a 6.5 rating, which, the reviews and ratings are still trickling in, so kind of early, and we don't have a great baseline, but all I really have is a baseline against the next episode, which we haven't watched yet, but it definitely got lower ratings than that, so I don't know exactly what to do with the numbers. But
I mean, I will say, like, anecdotally reading reviews of it all, there's probably like Metacritic or Rotten Tomatoes reviews of it, but people did not love this episode. I mean, some people thought it was okay, but it was not universally beloved by any means. I honestly didn't think it was that great. I sort of feel like I went into this, endeavor of like reviewing the new Twilight Zone a little apprehensively, because I'm like, are we really like, does our thing work for stuff that's really good? I mean, it kind of does sometimes, but usually it's better if it's not. But as soon as the episode started, I was like, oh, this isn't that great. I mean, it's just okay, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine. It's like a 5.
I felt a little awkward because, the classic Twilight Zone, we're talking about a show that's like 50 years ago.
Right.
Many of the people are no longer with us, so you feel less bad when
I don't think Jordan Peele is listening to this, John. I think you can go hard.
It will be awkward when we're all at the potties together or whatever. So I don't want to besmirch anyone's efforts. I think it's great that they're bringing this back. In the moment, we enjoyed it enough, and I do also wonder, like, is the target audience of this show jackasses who have watched all 156 episodes of The Twilight Zone and dissected them, or is it people who are like, oh yeah, that's that cool show with, like, it's a cookbook, oh yeah, and I like Jordan Peele, let me check that out. Like, it's hard to disassociate us with that, and like, when you go into it trying in that frame of mind where it's like you're watching it more with like the idea of what the Twilight Zone is than like really, holding it up against that, maybe it's a little better.
Certainly, like, the audience for this is not like hyper obsessed Twilight Zone fanboys, but even though you and I have watched every episode of the Twilight Zone and made a podcast about it, I wouldn't say that we're like, I never had the mentality of like, this has to be exactly like Shadow Play or I'm gonna throw a fit. Like, I definitely did not come into it.
Well, I'm just glad they didn't dare cast a woman in Rod Serling's role, or we would have burned this down.
No, but yeah, I didn't come into it with like crazy specific expectations. I think one thing I will say though is that the Twilight Zone, the original TZ, benefits, from the lens of nostalgia and through the lens of seeing it, or not nostalgia, but like through the lens of watching something from the past. You have a different lens than you would watching something from the present. And I'm harder on this than I would have been. Sure. If this like starred Peter Falk as like an Indian comedian in 1959, as it likely would have. Like, anyway, racism aside, I think I would have been like, okay, it's fine, And I guess I probably would have cut it more slack than I would something made in the present day. And maybe there's just no way around that. But all things being equal, I think it's fine.
I think that's fair. If this were just a 4th season episode and they had, the guy who was in Showdown with Rance McGrew or something playing the, sad sack comedian, I don't think I would have watched it and been like, oh yeah, that was a revelation. I think reframe it for that 60s lens. I think I probably would be harping on, oh my gosh, they hit the same beat 8 times and we get it and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I think you're right. In the moment, I thought it was fine. I had some quibbles here and there, but overall, I think 5 sounds about right, because I don't think I'd ever want to go back and watch it again. And I can imagine within 6 months I will be hard-pressed to remember much about it.
Except the part when they killed that dog. That was great.
I mean, that was pretty good, and...
One spot on the Gower Hour.
She loves it. She can't get through the drum solo because it's such a great bit.
That was pretty good. So, yeah, I think 5 is a pretty fair review.
All right, that wraps it up for The Comedian. We may keep going with this, despite all odds. If Sean's finger doesn't heal, listeners, pray for a slow recovery.
I have gotten some advice from a coworker who is an orthopedic surgeon, but it has not progressed in the way I'd hoped, so I might actually go see a specialist, so maybe things will get better, but right now it doesn't sound like they will, or seem like it.
Cool, so we may be back next week, or the week after that, or sometime shorter than the next 4 months. So stay tuned, and we won't be taking requests because we'll probably keep going with the Jordan Peele series. Stay tuned for that, but in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with us, there's tons of ways. Sean, what are they?
One could get in touch with us on Twitter at Twilight Pwn, especially if we've asked any questions or anything. I'm not really this petty. You can email us at twilightpwnpwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Facebook. You can check us out on our website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com, which I noticed I forgot to update the last time around, or someone did, but, we're doing pretty good.
I feel like our podcast will outlive Tumblr as a platform. I feel like it almost doesn't
I was thinking that the other day.
We should probably move it to, I don't know, Squarespace or something.
If you want to leave us a rating or review on iTunes, please. We do enjoy those. Thank you for everyone who helped us get over 200 at some point. And that was kind of cool. And thanks to Steffi3510 for writing a review. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Steffi. Cool. All right. Well, we've talked long enough, so I'll let you go. Catch you next week in the fleshy flesh.
Later, Fred.
Bye.